Evening, everyone. Welcome to part one of our two-part series on influencing the development of positive nutrition behaviours in your training environment. For those who have joined thinking that they signed up to a different webinar, don't fret. So we've changed the title from the original, which was building a positive nutrition culture within your training environment, and we've just tweaked it slightly to focus more around influencing the development of positive nutrition behaviours. So the aims and outcomes of the session that you originally signed up for are exactly the same. So don't fret, it's just a retweak of the words slightly. So I guess as a starting point, just to make some brief introductions, my name is Eoghan Hickey, and I'm one of the performance nutrition team at Sport Wales. Also on the webinar supporting me today, we have Sarah Carville, who's one of the performance psychology team, also working at Sport Wales. And also we have Zoe Brown from Welsh Athletics, who's on the call for the purposes of technical support. Hopefully we won't need her assistance at any point during the webinar, but just in case, she's also on the call. I guess just some housekeeping to get us started. So everyone has been placed on mute as default. So this is really for the purposes of just minimizing any interference or background noise while we're trying to run the webinar. And also for just for bandwidth purposes, so it comes across as smoothly as possible. Hopefully everyone can hear me clearly, but if not, feel free to pop something in the chat box. Also on that, so there is a chat box function enabled, which you should be able to see on your screens. So if anyone's got any questions or comments throughout the webinar, feel free to just pop them into that chat box, and Sarah will hopefully feed those through to me either during the presentation or at the end if it's relevant. We're also planning to run just one external question on via menti.com. So for those who aren't familiar, Menti is a external sort of Q&A platform. So we'll give you some instructions when it comes to it in terms of how to sort of log on and submit your answers for that particular question, and we can hopefully get some good interactive discussion going in and off the back of that. So it's just gone a few minutes past 7, so I think hopefully everyone that has signed up is in the call now, and we can get going with the first slide. So just to re-emphasize again, for those who signed up, the aims and outcomes of this webinar series. So firstly, the main two outcomes or aims from today are to discuss why nutrition matters for athlete health and performance, something that a lot of you may be familiar with already, but I guess just to delve a bit more into the why behind, the purpose behind the webinar. Why is nutrition important in the first place for your athlete? And also to develop your awareness and understanding of the influencers and behaviours which support those good nutrition choices. And then in the second part of the series, which I'll explain a bit more about at the end of the webinar. So this is going to be run on Thursday, the 30th of July at the same time, so 7 to 8 p.m. And the aim of that session will be to explore a bit more within your own training environment what you can employ on the ground in terms of environmental strategies to support those good behaviours. So give you some practical examples of strategies to put in place in your own club or training environment. So just to kick us off, as I said, as per the title of the webinar, so we want to explore within your own club or training environment, whether you're a coach, an athlete, a parent, whatever capacity you may be, what you're sort of seeing on the ground. Can you give us some examples of what is a positive nutrition behaviour? So just a bit of explanation for those who haven't used the platform before. If you've got a dual screen or a smartphone with you while you're dialed into this webinar, if you can put in the URL box www.menti.com, and once you pull that up, it should give you a single box where you enter a code to answer this specific poll. And the code that we're asking you to type in for this particular Menti poll is there at the bottom. So it's 980006. So I'm just going to leave it for a couple of minutes just so everyone has a chance to type that in, either in a separate tab, as I said, on your laptop or on your phone. And hopefully, barring any major technical glitches, we should be able to get some good examples in there. So we've left it open where you can submit multiple answers for this. So if you've got multiple examples of positive nutrition behaviors that you would see commonly at your training or club environment, you know, you can give us some good examples there, hopefully. If it's not loading for whatever reason for anyone, you know, feel free to let us know in the chat box. But hopefully for most people, it is up and running. And Sarah can hopefully feed in the answers in a couple of minutes, all going well. So I'm just going to leave it about 3 minutes just to give everyone a chance to log in and attempt this poll.
Oh. Oh, we've got loads of good answers coming in. I've just downloaded the results. So I'm just going to go through a couple of them. We've got understand food, fruit and veg, correct balance, healthy snacks, sufficient recovery, timing of eating. We've got eating habits, breakfast, positive relationship, hydration. We've got home cooked meals. We've got available fruit, just the word saying easy. So I guess that's, you know, easy availability. No junk food, appropriate snacks, regular meals, hydrating through sessions, bringing recovery snacks, fueling accordingly, fueling at training, timing of eating. So yeah, we got loads of good ones.
Great, yeah, some really good examples there. Yeah, exactly the type of answers, I guess, that we would have expected, which is really positive to see. If more start to trickle in, Sarah, feel free to feed those in.
Yeah.
I'll just move on to, I guess, my Blue Peter moment of one I prepared earlier. So I guess just to reinforce that it's a lot of similar answers across the board coming up. So we had there someone saying about eating 5 fruit and veg a day, being able to having the skill set to prepare and make their own home cooked meals, post training recovery snack we had. There was another one about eating breakfast, consistently having a balanced breakfast that Sarah mentioned there. So obviously that's really important for if there's a high training volume to you know, get that down and have it consistently. A couple of additional ones there that someone mentioned around hydration. So a habit to reinforce the hydration would be, you know, always having your own reusable water bottle at the training session, and remembering, obviously it's a memory and attention thing to remember to bring that. And then you can get into specifics around, you know, eating adequate protein throughout the day and different macronutrients, having enough oily fish intake to support cognitive function and joint health. So yeah, really good to see that you're observing some of that's you know, fundamental stuff from a nutrition point of view at your own clubs or training environments. So that's really good to see. So just to give you a bit of background and to move on a bit from, I guess, our mission as a performance nutrition team at Sport Wales and how we sort of view nutrition at an elite and a grassroots level, really. So our mission is mainly, as you can see in the top left-hand corner of your screen, is all about unleashing the power of food. And for me, fundamentally, what that means is really seeing how food can add value to aiding performance, because ultimately, I guess that's what everyone's after, and also facilitating a positive relationship between food and performance, not just for athletes or athletics specifically, but for life in general, because nutrition is something that you carry through right from a young age until you're finished playing sport. It's always there. So the three fundamental areas that we contribute to or feel that we have the biggest impact on as a performance nutrition team are adding value to increase training adaptation. So some of you mentioned a couple of these in the examples you gave. So for example, a post-training snack to repair the muscles and refuel them after a tough session. Aiming to maximize your competition performance. So when it comes to those meets or events, you want to obviously get the best performance on the day and peak at the right times during the season. And obviously we feel nutrition has a key role to play in that. And lastly, on the flip side then, so not so much about adding value, but trying to minimize or reduce the risk of illness and injury, which can have a knock-on effect, a clear knock-on effect on performance. So days lost to illness, if you've got an athlete that's consistently picking up small colds or flus throughout the year, that can have a big knock-on effect in days lost to that, and also injury, whether it's chronic or acute, that can obviously have a negative impact. So we're trying to, as much as possible, put strategies in place that are going to limit those. So just a little bit more on the why behind nutrition. So really, it's just one piece in the big puzzle of performance, which there's lots of other things. Obviously, your training, your gym work, your mental well-being, everything really feeds into that one holistic, I guess, performance model. And we just see nutrition as just really one small part of that, but a really key part in that. And just to give you some really basic examples that everyone would probably be aware of. So on the way you see the Lego, like the building blocks, that's a good analogy for how you would see protein, for example. So as your muscles break down, eating enough protein throughout the day will give you the sufficient building blocks you need to rebuild and repair those, so you're ready for the next session or event. Most people will be aware of like the importance of hydration. So there's just a small blurb about its impact on throwing as a very technical event. So trying to limit your fatigue and maintain your concentration through a session, even like a 2% loss or dehydration, fluid loss can impact significantly on this, and limit how much you get out of a particular session or a competition. So yeah, just some really fundamental examples there of how nutrition plays a big part when it's done consistently. And then on the flip side, again, as we mentioned, with the reducing the risk of injury and illness. So just a couple of examples here around those on the call that would be aware of I guess, more so in recent years, a lot of research has gone into this topic around RED-S, or relative energy deficiency syndrome. And these two examples here on the left and right would be some, I guess, key markers of RED-S, which you would commonly see if there was a severe case. So as you see on the left-hand side would be a stress fracture. So you're 4.5 times more likely to suffer a stress fracture when you have low energy availability or energy deficiency. And also from a iron perspective, so that's the image on the right. So low dietary iron intake or losses of iron that's not being replaced sufficiently through diet can lead to a loss in aerobic power, which then leads to fatigue and poor performance, I guess, inability to adapt to the training session or to perform in the competition when it really matters. And just to bring it to life, for those that would be following mainstream media in the last couple of years, you probably would have been aware of this prominent example from the US with track and field athlete Mary Kane, where it came to light that due to, I guess, an obsession with more aesthetic and weight management rather than a clear performance focus can lead to severe stress fracture, multiple stress fractures, loss of menstruation, a lot of which would have been discussed previously in the female athlete webinar that some of you may have dialed into. So that's, I guess, a real life example just to bring it home of how it can go wrong if nutrition is neglected or not focused on from a health and performance point of view, as opposed to, you know, purely aesthetics and focusing on weight management. So this is one of our favorite slides really as a performance nutrition team, just to emphasize really how complex it often is for an athlete on a day-to-day basis to consistently make those good food choices and those positive nutrition behaviors that some of you gave as examples that you're trying to see in your training environment. So really, a lot of people will often just focus on this top left-hand corner of the infographic, where it's purely physiological. So people will be aware of people's resting metabolism and how much muscle and fat they have can contribute to how much energy they need throughout the day for training competition purposes. But really, it's a much more complex picture than that in terms of how athletes will make food choices day to day. So obviously you've got lifestyle, beliefs and knowledge, relationships. From a psychological point of view, you've got body image and weight management. We also eat for pleasure, which can often contribute to food choices if you've had a particularly, you know, bad day, or the opposite that can influence it. Your social life. Obviously, we know athletes are people first, and ultimately they have social circles that they mix in, as well as being purely focused on their training regimes. Different socioeconomic, religious backgrounds can play a big factor into food preferences and food choices from a young age. And also then just things like taste preferences, which can adapt right from childhood through adolescence and into adulthood. And then people have different intolerances and gastrointestinal discomfort sometimes, which can impact on what they choose during training. So it really is quite complex, and people often, yeah, as I said, underestimate. And if you focus purely on just physiology and macronutrients, you can miss out on that big spectrum of various things that are actually underpinning those nutrition behaviors. And just to give you an interesting stat on it, which is quite surprising, I think, to some, is on a more subconscious level, individuals will make up to 220 decisions about food every day. That's not to say that that many decisions are going into specific meals. It can just be a fleeting thought or a subconscious thought that goes through your mind about nutrition or food choice. So it definitely is a massive element really that underpins everything that we do in life, not just in training and competition. So I'll be coming back and making reference to this slide again as we move through. Just to again give you another analogy to break it down. So what we got here is obviously a picture of a pole vault, and we try to emphasize that nutrition, as per the pole vault, is almost like you view it as a skill which needs to be broken down into specific steps that contribute to the overall desired behavior. So simply telling your athlete or a coach or anyone that they need to have good nutrition is simply like telling a brand new novice to pole vault that they need to just pole vault. Obviously, you'd never do that. You break it down into specific steps, focus on the key elements of it, and then with repetition and practice, it becomes embedded into their daily, you know, schedules, training regimes, etc. So nutrition really is no different to this. But oftentimes, what will happen is simply by giving the athlete, thinking that if you give the athlete knowledge or give them a meal plan, etc., that they're automatically going to change their behavior off the back of that. But unfortunately, it's more often than not that simple. It needs to be broken down, and it needs to be practiced and repeated. So a really nice example is probably around fundamental cooking skills and the ability to make home cooked meals. So if you run a one-off workshop just explaining the importance of nutrition and macronutrients versus running a series of cooking classes, it's likely that the series of cooking classes where you're repeating the skill, you're embedding it into their normal habits and linking it with some of those other factors around, you know, social, psychological, etc., that we discussed on the previous infographic, it's much more likely that they're going to then make that behavior an automatic process that they're doing more consistently, and then you're reaping the results and seeing that positive nutrition behavior come to light in the training environment, whether it be them bringing pre-prepared meals or posting about, you know, healthy home cooked meals that they made as a post-training snack, etc. So yeah, at Sport Wales we would normally work on a what you would deem, I guess, a performance backwards approach. So if a coach would come to you with a particular performance outcome, which is usually broken down into its most fundamental level, it's I want my athlete to jump higher, run faster, throw further. Then from a discipline specific point of view, so each discipline would have their own underpinning behaviors, which you guys gave some really good examples of at the beginning. So whether they need to hydrate so that they're not falling off in this particular split due to fatigue, they need to get 5 fruit and veg a day because they're consistently picking up small illnesses due to, I guess, a low micronutrient level, maybe contributing to that. Lack of recovery due to, you know, no fundamental cooking skills. They can't make their own home cooked meals and therefore relying on, I guess, processed food from a services, or this is just an off the cuff example. Whereas people normally will stop here and not really consider this, which is what are the influencers that are underpinning those behaviors that we need to then transition into the performance outcome. So hopefully I haven't lost people here. Just to try and break it down a bit more. So obviously the influencers, we're trying to explore a bit more. What are those that influence the behavior? So it can be positive and negative from either point of view, that then determine whether the athlete is doing what you're essentially trying to achieve, whether it be any of those, you know, that I've listed. And you guys gave even more really good examples at the beginning of the webinar. So I would encourage you, if you can, to use the chat box function here, just to type in some of these answers if anyone has got any responses to this. So I'm just curious to know, again, what you're seeing on the ground, whether it's in your own club training environment, etc. What do you deem are the key influencers for you or your athletes when it comes to making good food choices in that training environment? So like I said, what's underpinning those key behaviors that we spoke about at the start? So I'm just going to leave that similar to what we did with the Menti quiz. I'll just leave that for a couple of minutes, and hopefully if there are any examples coming through, Sarah can feed those in.
Yeah, so we've got some coming through. Lifestyles could be an influencer. Peers.
Yeah.
What a main influencer are parents' dietary habits.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah, we've got support, could be an influencer. And then time to prepare healthy meals and snacks. Training times. This is a really interesting one. Perceived reward for young athletes. If you train well, we'll go for a McDonald's, etc. on the way home.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yes, I've also seen examples of that. So yeah, that can definitely be a big influence.
Yeah. We've got time due to life schedules. Coaches' use of language relating to food. Again, coach. Distance to training, maybe having to eat in the car. That's obviously a really interesting one. Sometimes logistics. Allergies, the media. Again, juggling work and life balance. Great ones coming through here. Ease and speed of meal preparation, meal times. I know one of your favorites. So people on Instagram posting meals.
Yeah.
Can influence, obviously. Role models, again, Instagram. Prices of food, knowledge of what is good.
Excellent.
Yeah, loads of examples of influences I think we got there.
Yeah, that's really key. What's really encouraging from my point of view is, without me really drawing attention to it, a lot of you have identified that people, as well as the physical environment and where the athletes eat and what they can do, are also key influencers. So some of you mentioned things around the peers, the coaches, what other people are doing on social media. So people as well as physical environments can definitely be really key influencers on the desired nutrition behaviors, which I'll explain a bit more as we sort of move through. But those are some really key examples. Some of you mentioned around time constraints within the training schedule and what you can, I guess, put in place to try and, I guess, mitigate that or help the athlete out with that. We'll discuss some of that in more practical terms in the second part of the series. So that's really good that you've identified some of those. Yeah, if any more of those come through, Sarah, you can just feed them in at a later point. But otherwise, I'll just move on as I just go into a little bit more detail around those specific influencers.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned with the infographic previously, so nutrition behavior is complex, and it's not as straightforward as simply telling the athlete or giving them the knowledge about why nutrition is important for their specific event or sport, and then expecting them to change. There are those underpinning influences which a lot of you identified that go into those decisions. So this model here, which is came from a PhD researcher within the English Institute of Sport. So it's essentially a behavioral science framework where these three key areas of capability, opportunity, and motivation underpinning a particular desired behavior. And within these three, you've got different elements. So within capability, for example, there's physical and psychological. Physical being obviously skill, psychological more cognition and thought process. Motivation, again, what you do automatically without thinking and what you, I guess, reflect and plan on. And opportunity, again, from a physical and social point of view. So I'll discuss this a bit more, but for anyone that's interested, this is one of the key models as a performance nutrition team that we look at and try and assess athletes either on a group or an individual level as to how we can try and embed some of these key behaviors and target these influencers to improve that desired nutrition behavior. So to break it down in more practical terms, so everyone is quite clear, and feel free to, I can circle back to this slide at any point or at the end of the presentation if people have more questions. So we mentioned around capability just to begin with, so it being physical and psychological. So physical first on the top left-hand side, more around the actual skill of being able to plan and prepare meals, so fundamental cooking skills, which is really underpinning even performance nutrition. It's a life skill that's often picked up either throughout school, depending on your family influence, or sometimes isn't, and that can often really be a key low-hanging fruit for athletes as a skill that can be practiced and repeated and can have really good outcomes from a nutrition behavior point of view when you're trying to change a particular habit, whether it be, like I said, an evening meal when they come in for training, or being able to prepare and transport their own snacks, home cooked snacks or homemade snacks to training. That can all be down to just fundamental lack of capability in their ability to plan and prepare meals. Then just under it, from a psychological point of view, which is really where most traditionally people would view nutrition support as really just being targeted in this area. So that's the knowledge around the nutrition requirements for your specific sport or your events. So your macronutrient targets, what I spoke about, hydration, everything about the why nutrition matters at the beginning. So just simply having the knowledge about those things. Obviously it is a key element, but as you can see, it's only one small part. And if that's the only thing that's targeted via like one-off workshops or meal plans, the likelihood is the athlete won't change because they'll fall down on one of these other key pillars that we're sort of moving through here. From a motivation point of view, I guess so. From the top one, which is is to represent, a target or a goal. So that's from a reflective point of view. So if an athlete, this is really centered around an athlete's beliefs around nutrition and its impact on performance. So does the athlete truly believe, and are they invested? Do they have a clear goal that they're working towards, where they can see that nutrition feeds in and is a key element of that? And I guess it's a little bit around their identity as an athlete as well. So do they associate eating well with being whether it's an elite club level or, Olympic, Paralympic level, Commonwealth level, whatever it may be, do they associate eating well with their identity as an elite or sub-elite athlete? Then just moving on, just beneath that where you see the two smiley faces, I guess more to represent automatic motivation. So considering what the athlete does, do they maintain consistent nutrition habits even in the face of emotional disturbances, whether they've just had a bad day at the track or at a particular event or meet? Does that then lead to a day or a couple of days or even a week of really poor choices, poor food choices as a result of those emotional disturbances? So that can be obviously very difficult to change, but key to consider it nonetheless, and what the different elements are that feed into it outside of just purely performance nutrition. And then moving on lastly then to opportunity. So the top right hand corner, more in reference to the physical opportunities. So this is from the point of view of what is available what the food provisions like at the track or at the particular area where your athletes are training. Is there any food provision or is it non-existent? Is there, for example, a cafe which has some reasonably good choices, salad bar, some good, I guess, buffet where an athlete can build a balanced plate? Or is it a tuck shop where there's lots of sweets and crisps and I guess less performance focused food available? That's obviously a key one. Often it's something that you have limited control over, but important to consider the environment which which underpins the behavior. So if those choices are in eyesight and are embedded into the training environment, the likelihood is your athletes are going to be responding to that environment, or it's going to underpin a lot of their nutrition behavior. And then finally, from an opportunity point of view, is what we call the social opportunity. So that's where you see the peer link there. So that's everything from coaches, peers, fellow athletes. So are they receiving consistent messaging from everyone, or are they receiving different messages from whether they work with a nutritionist or not and the coach, or from a peer and the coach? Certainly if your head coach or a different member of staff is your main influencer on the athlete and they're giving a message which is not consistent with the nutritionist's advice or with the sports science and medicine team, that can obviously be a big pitfall in terms of long-term behavior change and trying to embed those good nutrition behaviors in the athlete's training environment. And yeah, I guess, are they supported by their peers in achieving this? So some of you actually mentioned it earlier when we asked for some examples of key influencers, so around even social media. So there's some good research actually recently which shows that certainly adolescent athletes are heavily influenced by what their peers are posting on social media from a nutrition point of view. And certainly role models within the sport can be a really key influence on that. Somebody that they look up to at particularly at, like we said, Olympic, Paralympic level, Commonwealth level, etc. It filters down, and those key messages that they're putting out there, whether it be on social media or just messaging in person at the training environment, that can certainly have a big influence on their own beliefs and desired nutrition behaviors that manifest from that. And then again, we're back to this slide, but just to give you some, pardon the terrible nutrition pun here, but to give you some food for thought as we move from this to hopefully most of you can join us for part 2 of the series, where we'll get into a little bit more on the detail of the practicalities of that capability, opportunity, and motivation, and what it means in your training environment, what you see, hear, and feel in your training environment. So on the left, I've just given you some key takeaways in terms of the flow process. So understand, first of all, what the desired dietary behavior is that you want to change, or what's the key limiting factor, or I guess area that you want to focus on that will hopefully improve performance or maintain good health and immunity. Then obviously identify where the barriers are, if there are barriers to that specific nutrition behavior. So is it the physical environment, like we said? Is there a tuck shop that's serving food which isn't appropriate? Is it their motivation? Do they not see the benefit of nutrition for their particular discipline, and how can you sell that to them? Or is it their capability? Can they simply just don't have the ability to plan and prepare meals, from being able to shop for themselves to actually cooking some really basic dishes? And then also, like we mentioned just on the last example, from a social point of view, who are the main influencers on the athlete? Is it the coach? Is it their peers? Is it a particular role model? Is it their parents, if it's an adolescent athlete, etc.? Yeah, I guess from that point of view, are you targeting the right audience from the messaging, etc., that you're trying to convey to the athlete? So just some really key takeaways to sort of think about from that point of view. And just now, for those of you who hopefully can join us for part 2 of the webinar series, as we mentioned, we would appreciate, you don't need to put this in the chat box as of now. It's more something that we would appreciate if you are able to take away and reflect on between the sessions, and maybe jot down some examples and make some notes in your phone or on your laptop, etc. From your point of view, again, what you're seeing in your own environment, whether you're a coach, athlete, parent, whatever it may be, where do you see are the possibilities to influence positive nutrition behaviors within your club or training environment? So what are those low-hanging fruit from those examples that we just discussed? Capability, opportunity, motivation, and into those different physical and social, psychosocial opportunities. Do you have any really key examples where you can say, yes, definitely this is an influence on the desired behavior? So in the second part of the series, we can discuss, actually, here are some, useful real life examples of performance problems, or like we said, athlete health problems, and these are the strategies we put in place to try and overcome those barriers to those positive nutrition behaviors, or reinforce the enablers, if you will. So yeah, if anyone would like to just take a quick snapshot of that, or a snippet on your laptop, just so you've got it and can reflect on that question between sessions, that would be excellent. We really appreciate the feedback. The answers so far for the previous 2 questions have been great. It's great to see that you've identified already some really key behaviours, both positive and from a, I guess, something to work on point of view. And yes, so after 40 minutes, I think that's not too bad. If anyone has any questions that you had either during the webinar or that you'd like to ask now, if you need me to circle back to any of the slides that you'd like to make reference to, feel free to put that in the chat box as well. And if anyone would like to ask any questions, I guess separately or not on this particular forum, there's an email address at the bottom of the screen there for which redirects you to the performance nutrition team here at Sport Wales, and we'll do our best to get back to you in a reasonably timely fashion. So yeah, I'll leave it there for the minute. And like I said, the second part of this webinar series, which is the same title, and we're just going to focus on really those practical on-the-ground examples, and that will be on Thursday, July 30th at the same time, 7 to 8 p.m. And you can register the same as previously on the Welsh Athletics website, via that link to register. And hopefully most of you, if not all of you, can join us again. So
we've got some questions come through, Owen.
Great.
So one of the questions that's come through, it says, is supplementation recommended? I was under the impression that we should aim to fuel athletes through diet. So which is supplementation recommended? What are your thoughts on this?
That's a really good question. It would really depend on the context, but definitely they're right from the point of view. We would always at Sport Wales adopt a food first philosophy. So it would be the first point of call if an athlete or a coach or anyone came to us with a question about supplements. The first thing we would assess is, can we get it from food? And if that's the case, then always we would go food first. So we would follow the three processes from UCAD, which is assess the need. So if we can get it from real food, we'll always go down the food route. Assess the need, assess the risks. So with any supplement, there's always a risk of contamination with obviously banned substances and just added ingredients that aren't listed on the label. And then the consequences, if we're working with athletes who are on a tested pathway under UCAD, then what are the consequences if we take a risk with a supplement, and is it batch tested, etc., etc. So yeah, we'll always go food first, and then if there's a clear performance question where a supplement might add value, then we might consider it as a secondary to food.
Okay, awesome. And then we've got some more. So we've got one that says, hi, I'm a fit 14-year-old boy, but insist on having a sausage batch and 2 chocolate bars a day. I know this isn't great, but can I get away with it?
That's an interesting one. I would say that potentially, I guess how you framed it, can you get away with it? I would say generally it wouldn't be optimal for performance. You might, in terms of getting away with it, I guess, when you're younger, you might tend to, your metabolism can change as you grow and get older. So at the minute, it might not be really impacting too much from anything, whether it's performance or body composition. But I would say definitely it isn't optimal. And when you, I guess, move up the ranks, if that's your goal, to sort of compete at a more elite level, then eventually those extra percentages that you need to, I guess, be successful, you will probably need to reconsider that and look at something a bit more performance focused. For example, like flapjacks and a glass of milk, or a bagel with peanut butter or banana. I can give you various examples of some good alternatives that are still reasonably tasty, but would also be actually beneficial for your health and your long-term health, certainly, and your performance. So yeah, hopefully I've answered that reasonably succinctly for you.
Yeah, awesome. And then we've got one that's come through, and I think it was related to the some of the examples you were talking about in the combi model, and it says, would you suggest starting the athletes off young with this, i.e. 9-year-old upwards? So I guess linking to some of the examples that you provided around capability. And
I would say that it's good to be aware and filter down that awareness at a young age with the athletes, that they should focus on that more holistic approach to their nutrition. So yeah, from a young age, this is more for the coaches and I guess parents really to be aware of, and how they might influence or what they can put in place to support those younger athletes. So from an environment point of view, or from a messaging, like key messaging point of view, that the right messages are being filtered down through the right channels. So I would say definitely at a young age, it's good to, to reinforce those messages from a health point of view first and foremost, and then a performance point of view as well. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then we've got a couple more that have come through. So we've got one, given the influence of social media, particularly Instagram, what accounts do you suggest us brackets and our athletes follow to help contribute in the creation of a positive nutrition culture?
That's a really good question. Very good.
It's a great question, isn't it?
That's excellent. Yes. I would say that it's difficult, obviously, not to plug ourselves. I mean, we have a nutrition Instagram page, which is just purely recipe focused. And we also have some key bite-sized pieces of nutrition information, which we post on there. You can find that at SWP Nutrition, Sport Wales Performance Nutrition on Instagram. Some other really good evidence-based sites, which you'll find nice bite-sized chunks of info and content. You can find on the British Dietetic Association page. They've also got a sport nutrition branch, which is the SNG Sport Nutrition Group. You'll find that via the main British Dietetic Association Instagram page. And then, yeah, I would say that's a good place to start. And I would also say, yeah, just be mindful of, I guess there are, like you said, it's quite a dangerous territory, social media, with influencers, etc., promoting different diets and detox methods, etc. So just be really mindful of fact checking those against, you know, the content you're seeing on the evidence-based channel, like I just mentioned there. Like the British Dietetic Association would be a good place to start.
Great, yeah, wonderful. I follow your account and it's very good. Some great simple recipes.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm conscious of not plugging it, but yeah, it's for some basic recipes, it's quite useful.
Yeah. I've got another question. It's come through. It says, one of my athletes doesn't eat dairy products. How can he get calcium into his diet? Quite a specific question, but
yeah, very specific. But definitely, certainly a common can be quite common, especially now. I think a lot of athletes and the general public in general are potentially moving towards more of a plant-based diet, either for environmental reasons or if they deem it, you know, useful for their own health and performance. So from that point of view, yeah, it can be quite tricky to get sufficient calcium when you're not eating dairy products, be it milk, cheese, yogurt, etc. Green leafy veg, although the bioavailability is quite a bit lower, so you do need to up the portions of those particular veg, but things like broccoli, kale, etc., tofu, products like this, you can definitely get plant-based sources of calcium. It's just to make sure that you're eating enough of them for the specific individual you're speaking about there, that they've got enough throughout the day to hit their requirements, which you'll be able to find via the British Dietetic Association and the British Nutrition Foundation in terms of guidelines for how much calcium at what particular age, if you want to be quite specific about trying to make sure they get enough. And then I would say, as what we spoke before about supplementation, that can be a secondary resort, but only once you've considered trying to get enough from the plant-based sources first, and then potentially considering a calcium supplement that's batch tested.
Yeah. Great, awesome. And someone's popped on here about can we provide the Instagram accounts to look at in our next presentation, as he wasn't able to write it down. You can always go back and listen to this webinar as well just to get them. But if you just quickly, can you just remind which ones you identified, Owen? The British Dietetics Society, and what was the other one?
Yeah, so it's the British Dietetic Association, or the BDA for short.
Yeah.
I'm just checking quickly on their Instagram what their actual handle is. I'm pretty sure it's BDA. BDA _dietitians, and our nutrition account is SWP Nutrition, which obviously stands for Sport Wales Performance Nutrition. Those are some useful ones. There's definitely a lot more out there with some really good evidence-based sources. Just off the top of my head, they're not coming to mind, but those are some good places to start.
Yeah. And I'm sure we can look into it and maybe put some on into the next, presentation if people would like it.
Yeah, absolutely. If people would find that useful, I can certainly tag those on to the end of the next webinar series for those who can attend.
Yeah, perfect. So if you've got that, that's it from. I've answered all the questions that are on the screen. If anyone has any more, obviously feel free to, pop them in. And then just one other comment is do we have to sign up for the second webinar series on the 30th of July if they've attended this one? And I think the answer is yes, you do. But just Zoe, as you're on here, can you just confirm, do they have to sign up again to the second part?
Hi everyone. Some great content there from Bo and Sarah. Thank you so much. Yes, so from a sign up perspective, if you can go to the event page on Welsh Athletics website and sign up via there, that would be fantastic. You will get an evaluation form at the end of this session, and then tomorrow you'll get a thank you for attending. We know it's another evening out of your week. You could probably be doing something different, so thank you so much for attending. And there will be just a little bit of a reminder then tomorrow about signing up for part 2, because I'm sure that you're hanging in to hear what Owen's got in store for you next time. So all you have to do is click on the link and register as normal.
Perfect. Thanks, Zoe, for that clarification. And yeah, if I haven't got any other sort of questions coming through, but if you have, like Owen said earlier, then just ping them in an email on performance.nutrition@sport.wales, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them for you.
Yeah, and like we said, if those who are planning to attend the next one, if you can just have a little think about this homework, I guess calling it homework is a loose term, but if you get the opportunity to just reflect on what you've learned here today, or whether it's something brand new, or whether you were aware of it previously, and then think a little bit about your own environment and what possibilities there are to influence those good nutrition habits and behaviours that you identified at the start. We can hopefully get into the detail on the next webinar.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks everyone for attending. Thank you again, as Zoe said, for giving up your evening to attend and listen to the webinar. And hopefully we'll see many of you, or virtually see many of you, at the second part of this, which is on Thursday the 30th of July.
Yeah, thanks very much for everyone who attended. Hopefully you found it somewhat useful. Yeah, and feel free to offer any feedback either in an email or in the chat function here.